Thank you, Samuel. I have the honor of introducing our guest speaker today. You be seated. Tim Murphy is here from Orphans Lifeline International, who's going to be sharing with us about the work of the whole organization, in particular about what he does. We're thankful that we get to have a partnership with them as we get to support the Hope Home in Haiti, the orphanage there. I was going to just do it straight out of Harlem, and then people would go, Harlem, yeah. Harlem, Montana. But Tim, we're honored to have you here, so come on up and share with us what God's put on your heart this morning. Thank you, brother.
I've been trying to figure this mic and stuff out, so push that middle button, hold it. Okay. Can everybody hear me? How about that? Is that okay? Good, okay. Yes, my name is Tim Murphy from Orphans Lifeline International. I flew in on Friday. It's great to be here. I've been working with Alan for about the last 9 years. Orphans Lifeline has been around for 22 years. We started it was extra rooms in a friend of ours' RV barn. We had 2 rooms that we used for offices and a bathroom, sometimes. Okay, and that could change depending on the weather and stuff. And I usually joke a lot, and you guys probably saw it in the first one, but this is where things get real serious. This is where we were 22 years ago, and Orphans Lifeline started based upon James 1:27. Pure and undefiled religion before God is to care for the orphans and widows and to keep oneself unstained from the world. So there's 2 things he's talking about: our attitude towards orphans and widows. And the other one is about how we deal with ourselves with the Lord, okay? So how many people in here have seen the orphans here in the United States? Anybody know an orphan? Okay, very few hands go up. And the reason why is because we have made it a big part of our whole social structure here in the United States. At one time, there was the orphan train, and that was to get children out there in families to work, fields and what have you. Families that didn't have children that needed them. Okay, I guess I've kind of failed to. Some of you guys already know my story. I'm going to make it real short compared to the last one. And I was raised on a farm ranch in eastern Montana. The snow does not melt over there. It wears out from blowing back and forth. Yeah, it does. Wow. The wind's always blowing over there. Right now, it's really dry, even though there might be a little snow. You wait 5 minutes, it'll change. Then we moved to Kalispell, Montana. When I was 17, I thought I died and went to heaven. There's no wind, there was no hay, and there was no mosquitoes. It was just beautiful. There's mountains, there's trees. It is gorgeous. I do love it. I can look out my office window. Well, the sliding glass window. We have an old house that we run Orphans Lifeline out of. We don't need glass. We don't need steel. It's just an old house that we converted. I remember pulling up the carpet in there and chiseling off some of the tile and stuff, and repainting. Dave Board, who was the CEO and one of the founders at the time, he and I'd be in there, come out with drywall dust, and we aren't your regular, we do everything ourselves. Very independent Montanans. But when we started seeing the plight of the orphans is when we went over to Russia 22 years ago. Okay, now let's see if I can. And we started going to the orphanages because we went over there. Well, originally, I guess I'm going to have to back up a little bit again. Jim Miller, who baptized my wife and I into Christ, invited us shortly after that to go to Russia with him. And it's like, okay, we're gone. People thought I was out of my mind to go to Russia, the Cold War and the whole works. But what we found when we got over there, that it was hard to deal with. There had been so much supposedly Christianity that came into that country when communism fell that there was no trust anywhere. So Jim and Elma started dealing with the orphanages, and little did even the Russians know that they had an orphan problem. At that time, they had 4 million orphan children, 2 million that lived in homes, 20,000 different homes across the nation, another 2 million that lived in the sewers and on the streets of the country. And a lot of them were, whoa, what did I do there? Okay, where's an 8-year-old? Yeah. But we started seeing these babies, and they had baby little sheet. They didn't have diapers, so when they wet or messed, it would just go everywhere. So if they were sick, they all would get it. I'd never seen something so bad in my life. And you'd walk into these homes and stuff, and there was the smell of death. Because what they would do when these children would die in the wintertime when we were first there, they'd store their bodies downstairs so they would stay frozen so they could bury them in the spring. So that permeated your whole senses. I wish I could bring that along with me, because man, I'd never smelled anything like that before. And I've been around dead animals. I've had to deal with them and stuff. And it's something that I will never forget. I really messed it up that time, didn't I? Yeah. At the office, they say I Murphatized it. So thank you for your patience. But these little ones were anywhere from newborn all the way up to, they had different homes. Okay, and as we started expanding and into the other countries, we found it was even worse. Because at least in Russia, they had these old Soviet buildings that they could put them in. We moved in India just before the tsunami there. And then we expanded into Haiti just before the earthquake. We have kids that are growing up in Haiti that don't even know their parents' name or their own names because they were killed in the earthquake from the buildings falling down. And they were found protected, just God's will. And they don't even know what their names are or their parents, who they even were. And we found out that, well, let me ask you guys this question. How many orphan children do you think they estimated are in the world? Or kids that don't have moms and dad, or they don't have anybody providing for them? Anybody have a wild guess? How many? That's a good start. Anybody else? Go ahead. 10 million, okay. Who else over here? 15 million. Well, if all of you added a zeroed into that, you'd be closer. There's an estimated 53 million orphan children in the world today. That's estimated. That means they don't know for sure. So we have got a huge project ahead of us. But we don't have to give everything that we have. All we have to do are touch some lives in there for the Lord. I wish we could help them all. I really wish we could. Great. Thank you guys very much. Which one's the fast forward button?
You want me to advance them for you? Just tell me when you want to go forward.
Just show me which button it is, if you would. Right or left? Okay, let me go right. There we are. I hit the one below it. Okay. But we started seeing these children in the conditions that they were, and they became like little prisoners in their own beds. This was actually an adult bed that they had redone and welded it. Like I said, I'm an old farm boy, so I welded, and you always got sharp pieces and stuff that are on. There was nothing there to protect them. And in this building, it was actually 50 degrees in there. These kids had been found, put in there, and they just survived. And they weren't even in the system of the government. They were actually being cared for by nurses and doctors with their own dime and their own time. We find them living on the streets. They've been abused, neglected, you name it. They're starving to death, some of them. beg for just a couple of cents so they can go buy some food for the day, or maybe the week even. We find them in situations. Can you imagine your child sitting there on the railroad track? What would you do? You go over there and grab them and hug them and take them back and tell them they don't have anybody do that for them. They don't even know what is safe and what is not. And a lot of times they're caring for a sibling. They've been walked away from by parents, or the parents have been killed and nobody stands up to take care of them. There's just so many. This is Haiti. This is your home, Hope Family Home, and these are some of the original children. And you'll see a little bit later the positive progress that they have made under our care. Okay, here we are again, 150 million. When we started, there was 140 million. So since we've started for 22 years, it's increased by 10 million. And by 2030, the estimate was we've got to do something about, because there will be a billion. There will be a seventh of the world's population are children that do not have parents or don't have parental care. So why are there so many orphan children? You know, where do they come from? Well, from war. This young fella had his leg cut off because they went and killed his parents, and to keep him to grow up to be a warrior, they cut his leg off. Disease such as AIDS. I guess I'm not in range of the camera, so I guess I better get over here. Disease, anything and everything you can think of. Hepatitis, COVID, things that we don't even know about, because in those countries they have things that we don't have, and we have things they don't have. The water. That's a city of 1 million people in Russia. I was there when that picture was taken. You know, if you had an iron deficiency, you do really well there, because you're going to get it whether you want to or not. And that you had to drink from as well. You didn't have much of a choice. Old farm boy, that doesn't bother me, but a lot of people are like, eesh. And that's the food. That's the same way in the cold as it is in the summertime. Okay. And these people, when they buy their food, they buy a little piece, and then they take it home and they turn it into soup with a soup base that they've made. And that's how they exist. They don't buy meat like a steak. They would turn that into probably 2 weeks worth of food. And the sanitation is horrible. This is an outhouse for 40 kids. And if one of them was sick, it would be all over in there, and then it would be tracked back in the building, and they would end up getting sick or giving it to everybody else. And the rashes and the skin issues that they have is, this little one just broke our heart. But what do you do? But that's where Orphans Lifeline came from. The reason I'm showing you some of these older people, because it's very unusual, especially back then. It has gotten better, but in Russia, if you were 50 years old, you were an old man. And it was interesting to see, because we saw 3 or 4 of them together, you didn't hardly see any of them. Now I believe it has jumped up to the age of 60. But in countries in Africa like Uganda, Kenya and stuff, somebody who's 40 years old, that's an old person. Some people we've been dealing with, working with the kids, have passed on. And it's like, wow, that'll really get your attention. And in order to survive, they beg on the streets. You know, older people, if you look down there, she doesn't have any shoes on. And if you think Montana's cold, you haven't seen nothing yet. Russia is horrible. A few years after we were there, it was 100 below zero. People would go outside, they'd freeze their fingers and their toes, and they had amputations. So you can imagine what children that didn't have anybody to take care of them. And just like a lot of things, they end up choosing the bottle or drugs to get away from life. Now, how do these kids survive? They beg on the streets, 30 below zero weather. It could be 110 degrees. In Moscow, you find them living in the sewers because it's warm down there. And then they huff, they prostitute their bodies so they can buy glue or paint so they can huff it, because that actually kind of takes away their appetite, so they aren't hungry all of the time. or they use them in kilns like here in Pakistan. They're forced labor, or slave labor, child labor, however you want to look at it. These kids, in order to make anything for money to eat, have to work hard in these brick kilns. And if they aren't being taken advantage of, they'll band together and create a structure someplace out in the country, and they pool their poverty to survive. Now, what is it like in an orphanage? Okay, well, if there is such a thing, this is just an example in Russia, but most of them are the same way. They're broken down, they're full of lice, mice. If it's on the outside, it's on the inside. It's unbelievable. Cockroaches, and we'll touch on that again in the future. But there's a lot of people that have the heart for the children, for the disabled, for the widows, but they just don't have the resources. I mean, they hardly can feed themselves, let alone somebody else. And if they do, it's very sparse. This was food for 35 children for 3 weeks. And we asked them, how in the world do you make it stretch that long? Well, we had a lot of water. That same brown water we saw before is what they make it, how they make it stretch. And if they do have food to cook, it is even primitive. Big old pots, and I cook like that myself when we go camping. I actually like the flavor of it better, but to provide for that many kids, that isn't easy. And a lot of them do, if they do have buildings, they aren't adequately furnished. This one we found out, they didn't have beds, they didn't have chairs, they didn't have anything. In fact, they didn't have a screen on it. They did shortly after that because we had a cobra come in and it crawled over all the kids and went out the back door. So that was the first thing we invested in. In clothes, they receive it from people that have kids themselves. They're wore out a lot of times when they get them. They've got holes, they just barely hang on them, and they're basically rags. In medication, this was a medical cabinet for, I believe it was 55 to 60 kids. Not very much, is there? My medicine cabinet, well, you could fill that thing because we have it so available and we have the funds to be able to do something like that. To give you an example, this little boy, he was kind of separated from the rest of them, and we asked him what was the matter with him. Well, he has pneumonia. And they said, what's going to happen to him? Well, he'll die. So they put him kind of over by himself. He was skinny. Oh boy, that kid was skinny. And we asked him, well, what would it take to help him to survive? And they said antibiotics, but we don't have any. So in Russia, you can go down to the pharmacy and you can buy anything you want as far as pharmaceuticals, as long as it's not a narcotic. You don't need a prescription. So we went down there for $6 American. We supplied the antibiotics for this little guy. But you can see the hopelessness in their eyes. Like I was telling everybody during Bible study, which was more of a talk than anything, is you can tell hopelessness, that distant look, but you can also tell they've experienced trauma by the whites underneath their irises, because usually their head's down, and you can see that white underneath of it. In fact, Alan was telling us when the kids, Windodyne, right? They saw she would put her hands out and come out to them. That's all she would do. Because they don't know how they've been neglected. They've been abused physically, mentally. They're starving to death. And so you can see it permeates their whole lives. We were there for 3 weeks. And man, I tell you what, by the time the 3 weeks were over, I was ready to come home. And they've got to live in this their entire lives. And even the insects take advantage of them. You see this little girl, she's 4 months old. That's a cockroach bite on her face. In the homes, cockroaches are a big issue. And when we were over there, we saw a baby that was younger than her, and the cockroaches were around his face. So I put the camera down and I declared war on cockroaches. Unfortunately, they come back when you're not around. But it really doesn't have to be this way. You know, we can make a difference in these children's lives. We can change the fact that sicknesses can be cured, or we can at least help them become young adults in the future. Because really all it takes is our compassion and a desire to help people. I'm going to talk about a couple now that Dave and Elena Board. This is Elena. I wish I would have put Dave in there because he was the co-founder and the CEO for many years. He passed away last November. He went home to the Lord. He had cancer. Tough man. He had a terrible childhood, but yet his heart were for kids like this. He was not only my brother in Christ, my boss, but he's also my fishing partner. And you know, some days we would get discouraged, and we would go fishing, and we just tell him that we're on the other line. Yeah. The man almost always outfished me. I don't know what it was, but some of these guys are just magnets. And he was one of them. I outfished him once. Boy, he was mad at me. But he had a real heart for these children. And I remember Orphans Lifeline in the beginning. We had zero money. In fact, I worked for him for the first 2 years. They could pay me when they could pay me, but I had enough in savings. I didn't have to worry about it because this is what I wanted to do for the rest of my life. I finally found out when I got into my 40s, I finally figured out what I wanted to do when I grew up. Now, my wife, you ask her, she'll probably still question that, but if I'm growing up or not, yeah. But these children, to see, you know, the helplessness in them, but you can do something about it. Okay, for 22 years, our program has been simple and inexpensive, complete, sustainable, highly successful, and totally transparent. In fact, last year, 89% of what we brought in went directly to the kids. Now, some people sit in here, they think of Orphans Lifeline International, this big building with glass and steel. No, it's an old house that we had to re-roof and tear all the walls out and rebuild them and re-drywall it, but it works perfect for us. We don't need anything fancy. It provides all of our needs and everything that we need to do. Now, there's 3 steps to our phases to caring for the kids of our program. Like I say, it's very simple. You know, we take care of their critical care right off the bat. What do they need? They need food, they need clothes, they need medicine, the medical treatment. And then there's beyond critical care. Okay, how can we get them to school, get them in education, get them books? And then we get them ready to go out into the world. Social integration, but all revolving around Christ. That's what makes this program successful, is all about Christ. We make sure they have plenty of food to eat. In fact, enough that they can actually give to the widows and with children, and also the men that are elderly or blind, that are handicapped. And it doesn't take much to keep them happy. How many kids you know would eat a fish like that? Yeah, not many. They're very happy to have it. We make sure that they have fruit. They get the vitamins and stuff they need. How many people you know live in huts like that? None of us. They were actually built for animals, but because of wars and problems between tribes, they had to end up living in these because the husbands are gone. We provide clean water. Sometimes we drill wells, or if there's water close, we'll run piping in like we did in Liberia to all the buildings. Of course, they don't have drains and stuff. And what amazes me, they only have to go down about that far with the pipes. In Montana, and I'm sure here in New York is the same, it's 6 foot deep. Yeah, so it doesn't freeze. Not over there, it's just, you know, a foot down. It just amazed me. We make sure they have clothes, and they have snow boots and snow pants and coats so they can get outside and enjoy their surroundings. And then we also make sure that they have medical treatment. They get an examination every year. Most of the time, it's a very happy thing. Fortunately, we had a little girl in Kenya, and her name was Sisa, and she had a hole in her heart. So they couldn't do the operation in Uganda. So we ended up getting her a visa, and we sent her over to India, and they did an operation on her. She came home, she was doing fantastic, and then she went downhill and she died. That is really hard to deal with. But most of the time, it's a great success. But in that time, that little girl got all the food she needed. She knew that somebody cared about her. The director of the home went with her because we didn't want her to be alone. And those directors are just like their parents. These kids see them as mom and dad. Now, the dental offices aren't fantastic. Most of them have never even seen one, so we provide that opportunity as well. And then we make sure all the medicine cabinets in every facility look like this. So if somebody's sick and they need it, it's there. And then we make sure they have beds. They get them up off of the ground. Now, we do replace these on a regular basis because the ones made out of wood, the bugs eat them. Bugs eat everything over there. I was amazed. The rafters we've had to replace in buildings because they're eaten by bugs. I didn't know it was such a thing. But it gives them kind of their own little space where they can go and study and research. And we make sure they have blankets and bedding. And in the cribs and stuff, we make sure they're painted. They don't have the lead-based paint in them. We make sure that they do have blankets and sheets and stuff. And we also make sure diapers. That's one of the biggest things that we purchase. It keeps the children clean, and it also helps prevent any diseases that could be spread around. Oops, here I go again. And not only do we do that, we teach them how to take care of themselves. In one of the homes, we put in a small kitchen for the kids so that they could learn how to cook for themselves and for family or what have you. Because most of them have no idea. All of that stuff has to be taught. Hygiene, how to brush your hair, how to brush your teeth, how to use toilet tissue, how to use Kleenex. All of that is something that is learned. And if the facility does have plumbing, we'll try to get it working. Sometimes we can't. We have to assess it first. But if we can, we'll put in new sinks and toilets and stuff. It doesn't take much. The babies, we make sure they have toys that are bright in color, that get their attention so they can learn and get better with their motor skills. And then we get them puzzles, something to challenge their minds. Do you notice that in all these pictures, you probably haven't seen a computer, you haven't seen a cell phone, you haven't seen an Xbox, you haven't seen whatever else these things are. These kids are just, they aren't available and they don't need them. They need something they can get on their hands. I'm not saying technology is bad. I'm just saying this is just the real basic that these children need. Look what this little girl is drawing. She was an orphan. They shaved her head because she had lice and fleas worse than any dog that I've ever seen. But look what she's drawing. A house, a rabbit, a tree. Do you think she had some dreams? We make sure they have an education. Most of our kids, especially in Russia, India, well, all of them, they've done so well. In Uganda and Kenya, they've gotten awards for being so good at school, getting extremely high grades. In these other countries, other than Russia, though, education is not part of the tax base. Like here, you pay your taxes, kids go to school. Over there, you got to pay a fee for your kids to go. And most of the time, they're a lecture-based school where if you get it, you get it. If you don't, too bad. So what we do is we hire tutors, and they'll come in. So these kids go to school at least 10 hours a day. When they get home from school, they go right back to it, and the tutors teach them and help them where needed. Whereas in their own schools, which they still have to attend in order to get credits if they want to go on to college or what have you, they have to get those credits. If not, they're considered uneducated and they're pretty much stuck where they're at. And of course, we make sure God's Word is available to them. We get every one of them a new Bible, or if the people that sponsor them, they can, part of what their sponsorship will go to buy Bibles for the children. And we ensure that they are either connected with a local congregation, or the preacher or director is a preacher or an elder, somebody that can teach them about the Bible. Just like Andre in Far East of Russia. If you take your finger and you are right in the middle of Siberia, that's where he's at. And he was an engineer, a dean of an engineering school. They didn't even own a car. It was funny, we had to buy him another one because he said it was just like in the movies. This car come flying over the snowbank and it T-boned them and it wrecked their car, so we had to buy him another one. Funny thing is, in Russia now, you have to buy Russian cars. You can't, if you have a car you bought from Japan, okay, if it gets wrecked or what have you, and you can't repair it, you can't go buy another one. You have to buy a Russian car, and they are junk. Even the Russians call them that. But they would stay overnight, so they saw these kids as their grandkids, and they did not even know that they had a problem with orphans. It's something that Russia hid, and a lot of other countries do as well. And these kids know where this all comes from. They know because of Christ, and they pray for you individually as a congregation, thanking the Lord for people like yourselves that'll take out of your own pocket and help them to survive. We teach them woodworking, something that when they get out of school, they have a trade or get out of the facilities. We make sure they have sewing machines, material. It's amazing what these girls can do. Has anybody had a garden before? Yeah, they're a lot of work, aren't they? They had 5 acres. We did that once when I was a kid. We stopped the next year. Yeah. But 5 acres, and they're willing to do it. They grow thousands of pounds of cabbage, and they process it, make a soup base out of it, and then it freezes, and they'll go in there and chip a bunch out. Then they take some of that meat they go buy. In fact, our kids are better fed than most people are in the country of Russia. In Liberia, we built tilapia ponds. The kids actually did. They dug them out. We supplied the fish. They would feed them. And then they net them, take them out. They dry them. They sell them to the locals. And then they also provide for themselves. So the goal of all these homes, where we can, is to make them become a little more self-sufficient. Now, when these kids get out, what kind of job do you think they'll have? A couple of our boys that have come out of there took a real interest in it, and now they work in this tilapia farming businesses somewhere in Liberia. So they're now self-sufficient. They can provide for themselves and their own children when they have them. Now, what does it take? Unfortunately, it takes that green stuff there. That is $300, and that's almost 9,000 rubles in Russian money. To give you an idea, it'll buy 7 to 10 times more than it will here in the United States. That's why we don't ship anything over there, because once it leaves here, we never know if it's going to get there. And if it does, it'll cost 10 times more by the time it gets there than it would for us to buy it in country. You know, all you have to do is just save one orphan. You know, you're giving them the gift of life. You're saving their lives and teaching them the gospel, which then saves their soul. This is interesting because I remember going into this one facility, and there was 30 cribs like this, and there were all these little ones that were sleeping, you know, no mothers around. If there was one little one like this in here and it started to squall, what would happen? There'd be all kinds of ladies and men up making sure they're okay, right? Not there. They learned a long time ago crying didn't do them any good. But we can give the directors and the caregivers the tools that they need to take care of them, and then also gives them time to spend with them one-on-one if they possibly can. Remember that little boy that does dying pneumonia? Okay, he was adopted in the United States. He now lives in Norman, Oklahoma. He's 17 years old. He was going to be an optometrist. Now I believe he's going to be an engineer. Dmitry Pushkin was his Russian name. Now his name is Zach Jones. You know, adoption isn't for everybody. It's not easy, but it's well worth it. And we definitely support that. If somebody is interested in adopting, Lori Timmons at the office, we have free referrals of adoption facilities that we have researched, and she has found that they do very well. We used to have our own adoption agency, but who wanted to go to Montana to adopt? So we became more of a referral for people. So if anybody's interested in that, give us a call, talk to Lori. She's more than happy to do that for you for free. Now that little girl with the cockroach bite, she's in the Navy down in Jacksonville, North Carolina. She was in Florida. This is Russia's throwaway. She now protects this country. They've been calling her Mr. America because physically she's a powerhouse. How do I know that? That's my daughter. In Jacksonville, North Carolina, she went through the physical test. She's 5'3", 5'2". I'd say she's 5'2". She says she's 5'3". But anyways, she did the physical test, and she got the highest score a woman could get. She then, being a corpsman, she would be a Marine corpsman, so she'd be tied with a Marine platoon. So she had to go through their basic again, too. She aced it. Now, Annika used to have some problems with education because we think she might have fetal alcohol syndrome. She has these little soft ears. I just loved them when she was little. And she has found out she can learn. And she has done very, very, very well with her schooling. She's not a straight A student, but she does extremely well. She was my hunting partner. I used to drag her around the mountains and stuff in Montana. Now she drags me around, and one of these days she might have to pack me out. So I'm glad she's in shape. Yeah. Anyways, now the little guy on the bottom there, bottom left, that's our son. He's also adopted from Russia. He was 19 years old. He weighed 19 pounds. He was starving to death. I could pick him up with one hand. There was nothing to him. Now he's my height. He looks me right in the eyeballs, but he weighs 135 pounds. My left leg weighs 135 pounds. But smart kid, he's doing extremely well. All they needed was love and some opportunity. Now, was it easy? No. There were some times I knew why some animals eat their own young. But I would go through it again. It was well worth it. Now we glorify God. Things have changed a little bit. Because of COVID, we can't start these homes anymore. Did we talk about that this time? Okay. Well, because of all the child trafficking and stuff, we cannot start these family-style homes anymore. We can deal with the existing ones, but we fill them with the kids that don't have parents. There's a lot of them that may have a mother that's a widow or have a father that's a widower. Just like in James 1:27, we take care of them, so we go there and we ensure that they have the food that they need where they're at. So not only are we helping the kids, but we're helping the rest of the family and the widow as well. And we've also started building homes for them. That hut in the previous one is what they usually grow up or raised in. For $3,000, we can build them a concrete-based building, 2 bedrooms. It's not very big. I cannot remember her name right off the top of my head, but she called it her mansion. It's all perception. And then we furnish them. That is actually more than the cost of the house. So that 89% of what goes these actually 100% goes to these homes and the furnishings. There we are in Haiti again. Okay, these are your kids. We make sure they have plenty of food there too. You know, beans and rice are the huge part of their diet, isn't it, Alan? Yeah. And then make sure they go to school. Fatan, the director, he is actually the principal of the school. And they go to church just like we're doing right now. They take part in communion. There's many baptisms only in the ocean. You know, not in the fancy baptistry or what have you. And Fatan is the one on the right-hand side. You know, we complain a little bit about him because he does everything in Haitian time, but he does a wonderful job taking care of the kids, and they call him Papa Fatan. Now, what greater honor in the world isn't that, to be called a father? The little boy he's holding, that little boy was found out in the middle of nowhere. Things are getting so bad in Haiti, even the parents are abandoning their kids out in the middle of nowhere. And we got an email say, hey, we got another one we need to take care of. Can we bring him in? Well, of course you can, yes. The only thing that keeps us from taking more care of more kids is money. Money is, they say it's the root of all evil. It really isn't. It's the love of money. And for me, I could go someplace else. I could probably work for another nonprofit and make 3 to 4 times more, but I love what we do. And we're an extension of the church, and we work in partnership. So I'm here to thank this congregation. Man, I have been so impressed. You guys really have the heart for others, you know, with the bread and your store over here, your 5-figure discount. Yeah. And you really have the heart for people. It is so wonderful to see, and that's what makes this congregation so healthy, is your care for others. Thank you, guys. If you have any other questions, I'll be around for a while today, but it's because of you that we're able to do this, and we get to glorify God, and the kids and the widows receive the benefits. Okay, God bless.